Good afternoon. I'm Miranda Beaver, and I'm going to be working with Kyla Cox-Deckard, and I'm going to hand the meeting over to her to start the regularly scheduled meeting for today.
Thank you. I call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Public Works this Monday, February 10th of 2025. First up, we have messages from board members. Do we have any messages from the board today? All right, seeing none. Next, we have petitions and remonstrances. If anyone is here who would like to make a public comment on something not on our agenda today, now is the opportunity to do so. If you are with us on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, you can use the raised hand function or the chat function to let us know. If you're in the room and you would like to make a comment about something not on the agenda, you're welcome to approach the microphone.
No comments on Zoom.
All right, seeing none. Next is the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have approval of payroll. Are there any questions from the board on the consent agenda? Any public comments on the consent agenda?
None on Zoom.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda for today's meeting of February 10th, 2025.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next is new business. First, under new business, is approve resolution 2025-005, Kirkwood Outdoor Dining.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chaz Mottinger from the Economic and Sustainable Development Department at City Hall. We are presenting some more guidelines similar to the parklet guidelines you passed last month for the outdoor dining program. Council in January passed a new ordinance establishing an outdoor dining program that will do a Kirkwood conversion, which means closing all blocks of Kirkwood from Walnut to Indiana, as well as doing the parklets, which, as you recall, are parking spaces taken over to allow for expanded outdoor dining for restaurants in the downtown corridor. You passed those guidelines in January, and now for parklets specifically, and now we're asking you to look at the Kirkwood conversion guidelines as well. So I'll leave it at that and let you ask any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board? What we have before us right now is, in addition to the summary of the overview and the guidelines, is the request for this year's closure. Is that correct?
Yes. So the ordinance that City Council passed, the general block closure is for all of the blocks to be closed. As assessing it as staff, we decided to go forth with that is written in the ordinance and ask for that full closure of the 100 through 500 block on Kirkwood Ave. With that being said, I want to point out one of the blocks on the 100 block where that's where the Buskirk Chumley is. We're asking for that to be a half block closure for now until we further assess accessibility for the Buskirk Chumley Theater. But yes, we are needing you all to approve the actual closures of each block. So, yeah.
For this year?
For this year.
And we can make other decisions
annually.
in future years?
Yes. And and I will say it's also based on what construction or other projects might interfere with closing any blocks. That's not necessarily happening this year, so.
So Miranda sent us a notice that was referred to the board, or a letter explaining their thoughts. Can you just talk through, as you've made the decision to close all the blocks, what outreach you've done to businesses on all the blocks of Kirkwood, please?
Yes, so we have We held one of the city council members held a listening session last Monday, as well as our assistant director for small business, Dee De La Rosa. She has talked directly to businesses, and we've also worked with Talisha of Downtown Bloomington, Inc. and the Kirkwood Community Association as well, who are more directly affected. We've talked with them and met with them and tried to keep them updated through email or through meetings. And it's kind of actually been the same for the past few years. It's a bit 50-50 on what to do for all the businesses, whether retails or restaurants. So it's hard to totally go by business preference because there's not a clear indication from that. And we've done, one of the main things we've done is a business survey. Before we went to council, we did a business survey, and the majority of the people who partook in the business survey, which was 20-some businesses, the majority, which was not just restaurants, it was also the public library, a majority of them, and I can share those results too, they did support the block closure, but that was not necessarily every single business. We do our best to try to get absolutely all of the opinions, but that doesn't always necessarily work. But again, out of, I think, almost nearly 25 businesses of all sorts, the majority, when we did that survey in January, were okay with Kirkwood closures.
Okay, that's helpful context. Thank you.
One of the concerns cited in the letter was a concern about the alleyway traffic and some of the ways that the closure requires, traffic that might have used Kirkwood to rely upon the alleyway. And I think this was specifically in the 500 block, where that, alleyway is a fairly robust roadway there. And I think there were just concerns about delivery traffic and some of the other access that has to happen, and the fact that it gets particularly congested back there. I was just wondering if there have been efforts on the part of the city to try to problem solve specifically with those kinds of things like deliveries. I know that anytime we close a road, delivery traffic and access for deliveries is one of the main concerns, that come up. So just curious if there have been some solutions identified or some discussions among businesses and restaurants about that issue in particular.
I will also start, if you don't mind, talking about the factors at play why we do think closing the block is safest, just for further context, because I do think that's important. It's also about the traffic flow. So traffic down Kirkwood can only, if we left that block open, it could only go left on Dunn, and it would get basically there's a additional traffic burden to the area by leaving only that block open based on the one-ways. Also, if you are on that block going west, there is potential for the bollards to be ran into more so if that whole block was closed. And so the ordinance that we have also prioritizes space for community, which means we kind of have to defend leaving it open, and there's safety concerns for leaving it open as it being the only block in that part for traffic stuff. And then because if all of the other blocks are closed just for future Kirkwood planning efforts, there is a strong preference for that to be closed so we can actually do more of a study to see what happens. So that's kind of all the reasoning. That being said, we do strongly care about the businesses and their impact. So that is still being discussed. We don't have necessarily a solution, but we're definitely aware of the problem, and hopefully we can find some sort of solution. So there's no current solution, but we're still looking into it, and hopefully we can figure out a way to address it. I know that some of the issues are solved with more ADA spaces, which is definitely going to happen. So that's not particularly exactly what you're asking, but I know that is something that will definitely happen. We're going to add to the side streets at least 6 more ADA spaces that, because of the block closure, would have been taken away. They're not going to be taken away. We're adding that for sure before the program starts on April 4th. So those things might help. So I know one of the things we had mentioned is potentially, and this is not necessarily going to happen, but, you know, maybe on the side streets having drop-off, a designated drop-off area for businesses who would need that more. So that could be something that happens. So again, no 100% solutions, but yes, there are ideas and thoughts, and we're trying to figure that out still.
I know another element that the city's been dealing with in general is, you know, we read the recent news report about the issues of double parking, which with Kirkwood being closed across those blocks, you're going to remove that issue because people won't be parking or double parking in that area. But I think, you know, mentioning the idea of having some sort of drop-off points, you know, maybe also figuring out, you know, how some of the existing infrastructure can support short-term parking for particularly those delivery drivers that may keep them from blocking an alleyway, where I think they actually have permission to block an alleyway for a certain period of time. So just trying to navigate keeping those alleyways accessible while also accommodating the business traffic of the delivery drivers too, and maybe that can be incorporated in that drop-off model to see if there's a way to deal with that when Kirkwood is open also. And the double parking issue comes up again.
Just a couple quick questions about the implementation section here. You mentioned a fire lane will be left in the middle of the street as necessary, and where the street is closed with a contiguous barrier, there will be a bike lane. Are either of those additions to the program this year? Have those been done in past summers, and what specifically will that bike lane look like?
To the first point, the fire lane, that has always been done. So when the restaurants who want that expanded outdoor seating, or any business who wants to do something, they have to apply. And so we work with them, a team of internal staff works with them to determine what their space is. So we make sure, I forget exactly the width, but we just make sure that there's a space for a fire lane when we determine who's able to participate and where their items can go. The bike lane, I don't think we've totally... It won't be marked. Okay, so we've kind of had one before. It won't be marked. It will just kind of act as a bike lane. People just use it as one, but it won't be marked necessarily. So is it new? People have always historically during the program kind of used it as one. So I don't think we'll have any currently right now that I'm aware of. We won't have any necessarily new signage right now for this year at least, but.
So the street has no additional demarcations. There's no spot that this portion of it will be the bike lane.
Hi, Mike Stewart, Engineering Department. That's correct. We're not doing any additional markings or anything like that for this rollout.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions on this item? Any public comments on this item? Again, if you're on Zoom, you can use the raised hand function or the chat function to let us know you would like to make a comment, and if you're here in person, you are welcome to approach the microphone.
No comments on Zoom.
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve Resolution 2025-005, Kirkwood Outdoor Dining.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have approved Resolution 2025-007, Renew Mobile Vendor Top Shotta Jerk Chicken.
Miranda Beaver, Public Works, for Susan Coates of the Economic and Sustainable Development Department. The Top Shot Jerk Chicken by its owner Tanisha Henline has applied for a mobile vendor license to operate a food truck or trailer. This will be for the year of 2025, and the business will be selling food via a mobile kitchen, food truck, or trailer. And this application is for 1 year and will require a renewal. And the ESD staff is in support of this request.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item? Any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom?
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2025-007, renew the mobile vendor Top Shotta Jerk Chicken.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have approved Resolution 2025-008, surplus of 54 parking meter housing units by Parking Services.
Hello, Rayanne Cox, Manager of Parking Enforcement. The City of Bloomington Parking Services have 54 parking meter housings that are damaged, non-repairable, and unusable. We'd like to dispose of those.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item? Any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom?
All right, is there a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2025-008, surplus of 54 parking meter housing units by Parking Services.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Next up, we have approved preliminary encroachments into right-of-way for convention center expansion.
Hi, Maria McCormick from Engineering. This is a request for preliminary approval of the 2 items of encroachment, actually 3 items of encroachment, for the new convention center expansion that will encroach into the right-of-way. They were wanting to get preliminary approval before they get too far into the design process of these items, just to make sure that the board would be amenable to accepting them into the right-of-way once they are constructed. Of course, we will make sure that they get all appropriate permits and approvals before and we will bring it back to you for final resolution approval. But this is just a preliminary so that they have some idea going in what you guys will accept from them.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item?
Maria, for the benefit of those that may not have access to the packet, can you briefly describe what the
Oh, I'm sorry.
encroachments are?
So one of them is a pedestrian sky bridge that will take the existing building.
Oh, I've got digital versions, yeah.
The sky bridge will go from the existing convention center building second floor to the second floor of the new convention center building, which will be across College Avenue, just south of 3rd Street. So that sky bridge will be at approximately 17'10" over College Avenue. They were able to bring it up to what specs engineering wanted and NDOT requirements for pedestrian bridges. And then they have limestone blocks that they want to place in front of the entrances on 3rd and College and 3rd and Walnut to prevent errant vehicles from coming into the building entrances.
Great, thank you. And at this point in time, there's no plan for any kind of sky bridge to connect to the city parking garage, is that correct?
There is no plan for a sky bridge to attach to a city parking garage.
All right.
They only have one proposed sky bridge, which attaches the 2 buildings.
Thank you.
The phrase limestone blocks is a little vague. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that might look like in practice?
Is there somebody here? I don't know.
Okay.
I was envisioning kind of what we have out here
Yeah.
in the front, but yeah, it'd be great to hear. If you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Bill Riggert with Bletzel Riggert Cooper James. We're the civil engineers working on the Convention Center project. Right now, the limestone blocks are kind of a placeholder, kind of, like you say, split face mill blocks from a local quarry, and they would be placed out in front of the two entrances. I thought I submitted a site plan, but I don't know if it got in the package. Anyways, the entrances are at a slight angle, like a 45, and they face to the northeast and the northwest. And those intersections of College and Walnut, or even 3rd Street, someone could maybe drive in through the front entrances. So we thought we'd use something like a limestone block to protect that.
Okay, thank you.
And that'll evolve as we get further into the design.
And you had mentioned the sky bridge is roughly 17 feet
10 inches above the
roadway, which was what
yes.
was specifically requested and complies.
Engineering requested 17'6",
Okay,
and they got it to 17'10".
okay. And that road, I mean, it seems like for what traffic would expect, that is beyond what some of the other overpasses would be along the corridor.
Pedestrian bridges aren't normally as robust as a vehicular bridge.
Right.
So the added height is just an added protection. Normally if a vehicle hits a bridge, it's going to damage the vehicle. A lot of times, if a vehicle hits a pedestrian bridge, it's going to damage the pedestrian bridge. So with that height, engineering is comfortable in accepting the preliminary acceptance of the Sky Bridge. Again, we haven't seen engineered drawings. It hasn't gone through any of the approval processes, but as long as it goes through all of the approval processes and gets all the permits that are required, basically, they're just wanting to make sure that you guys will accept that encroachment.
Great. Other questions from the board?
I'm trying to think about the space. On 3rd Street going west after College, there is a pedestrian walkway that's raised, is that correct?
The
Over
B line.
The B line, yes, the B line. Is that, any idea what that height is? I'm just trying to figure out if the Sky Bridge is going to be level with that or higher than that.
I believe it will be higher.
Higher.
than
That's what I
that
think, too. I
pedestrian
think that's
bridge,
higher
or
than that bridge.
approximately, it'll be a little bit higher or approximately the same height.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the preliminary encroachments into the right-of-way for the Convention Center expansion.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have approved quitclaim deeds for Switchyard Park.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Street. I'm the Director of Bloomington Parks and Recreation. Coming before you today to ask for approval of a series of quitclaim deeds related to Switchyard Park. It's not uncommon for the many different parcels that the city manages to have technically different names recorded because they've been acquired in different ways over the years. But as part of the closeout to Switchyard Park, we have to record an environmental restrictive covenant due to the coal ash and other environmental contaminants that we've sequestered on site, which has proven very difficult to do with the park in different parcels. So we are aiming to consolidate those parcels into one to record the environmental restrictive covenant. And 3 of those parcels are in the name of City of Bloomington, which defaults to the Board of Public Works. A few others are in the RDC, and I'm going to them also to ask the same of them. This would just consolidate ownership under the Board of Park Commissioners so that we can consolidate the parcel and record that covenant.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item? right, any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom.
Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the quitclaim deeds for Switchyard Park.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have approved consulting contract with American Structure Point for West 2nd Street Construction Engineering.
Hello, Kendall Kanoki, Engineering Department. Happy to see you all today. This is the construction engineering contract for the West 2nd Street Modernization and Safety Improvement Project. Construction engineering is required by NDOT for federally funded projects. This contract is in a not-to-exceed amount of $743,707.06. Construction engineering or construction inspection is billed hourly, so it is possible that we do not spend that entire amount. It is not a lump sum, so we only pay for services that we get, which is great. The consultant, American Structure Point, was selected through the NDOT consultant selection process. So they were the top ranked firm of, I think we got 7 different consultants that expressed interest in this contract. This is going to be fully locally funded through a 2022 Parks GO bond. The federal funding is all tied to the construction contract, just for simplicity. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Any public comments?
None on Zoom.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the consulting contract with American Structure Point for the West 2nd Street Construction Engineering.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next is approved sidewalk, bike lane, travel lane, and alley at Poplar Building for F.A. Willem.
Hi there, Kyle Ball from Engineering. F.A. Wilhelm is requesting an approval for a protected bike lane closure, sidewalk closure, and alley closure as part of the second phase of the Poplars redevelopment project located at 400 East 7th Street. These proposed changes include two-way protected bike lanes on East 7th to be closed between North Grant and North Dunn, bicycle traffic to be rerouted into the adjacent travel lanes as seen in the attached MOT. The sidewalk closure on the north side of the property will remain closed, so south side of East 7th, with a detour taking folks that are on Grant or Dunn to the north side of 7th Street to cross that block. And then the alley closure is the east-west alley on the south side of the property between North Grant and North Dunn. This requested closure would be in place from February 17th of 2025 until November 21st of 2025. The bike lane closure is necessary to accommodate a on-site crane for construction. Several alternative locations were considered for crane placement. These included North Grant, North Dunn, and the Indiana University parking garage, but all were ultimately deemed to be more problematic than placing it there on 7th Street. Additionally, city staff met with Bloomington Transit and City of Bloomington, and the City of Bloomington Bike Ped Coordinator to evaluate the options for managing this closure. The two alternatives that were considered would be option 1, which is a dedicated bike lane and vehicle detour, which would convert the eastbound travel lane on East 7th into a bike-only lane, so squeezing that lane in and just diverting the bike lane into that for the two-way bike traffic there. This option posed a few challenges, so those included just a reduction in the turning movements for the detoured vehicular traffic in that area. We also were trying to be mindful of the proximity to the Kirkwood outdoor dining closure as well. This would have disrupted the Bloomington Transit route and actually increased the travel distance for transit riders to make those alternative bus routes. or bus stops rather. As I flip pages here. So that was our first option. The other option, which is the one that we're ultimately recommending today, is a bike lane diversion. This setup would merge the protected bike lanes into the adjacent travel lanes at the designated diversion points. This approach aims to minimize the disruption to Bloomington Transit and reduces those detours onto East 6th Street. This is also a more simplistic maintenance of traffic plan overall with fewer moving pieces. Side note, material deliveries for the project are expected to take place throughout this phase and are expected to take place at the construction entrances seen on the MOT plan on the northeast and northwest corners of the project site. So those will be taken from North Grant or North Dunn and should not take place on East 7th at all. Also of note, this current request does not include sidewalk or parking lane closures on, or metered parking closures, excuse me, on North Dunn or North Grant, although those were discussed with the applicant. City staff will expect to conduct regular inspections throughout the closure period and to ensure that traffic control measures are acceptable throughout. Happy to take any questions, and we might have some folks online too, if there are more detailed questions.
Several times an MOT in the packet. We did not receive an MOT in the packet.
Oh, I thought I had attached it. Okay. Well, I have a copy here if you guys would like to take a look. I can walk through it, but essentially we're doing a temporary marking through each of these intersections so that each of them go to the appropriate east-westbound lanes. So diverting both those bike lanes into the traffic lanes. Not ideal, but we're operating on limited space here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry.
With the MOT, are there plans to have maybe even concentrated during the beginning of this phase, some signage just warning both bicyclists and, vehicle drivers that this merger is happening and that they need to be aware that you might have bicycles trying to merge in and, preparing the cyclists for the fact that it's no longer a dedicated cycle pathway.
Yes, absolutely. So that's been discussed. I'm not sure if it's located on that current iteration or that copy. We've went through a few revisions, but the copy that's submitted for the permit application does include placement of signboards. Of course, we'd expect those to be critical during the initial implementation. We should see, a decrease in traffic over the summertime. And then, of course, the new school year starting, that should be towards the end of this closure period, but we'll definitely want to be sure that those are, the entire MOT is really well defined during those periods especially.
Yeah, and particularly the Grant intersection, because with Dunn, you at least have stopping.
Right.
Right? There's no stopping at Grant. So, I think making sure that there is that indication there, since you won't naturally have traffic kind of pausing
Right.
for a moment to be aware of what's happening.
And yeah, I'll say in meeting with the bike ped coordinator, as well as Kendall, who just spoke, who bikes around town, those turning movements, that was a big concern initially, right? The awkward merging, those turning movements not being comfortable for the rider, completely hearing those things, but also trying to do the best for the most people possible, so in a lose-lose situation here.
Yeah, I really appreciate the description of the options that were considered and, the elements of each of those, because I think, from my perspective, the preferred recommended option would be the one that I would see as preferred, especially considering all of the transit activity through that
Yes,
corridor.
absolutely.
I think that's also important to factor in. Other questions on this? And I'm guessing by your note that we might be seeing additional closures requested for some of the side streets or the parking as the project moves forward.
So yes, that was one that FA Wilhelm wasn't quite sure on just yet. Our initial thought was potentially the deliveries or oversized vehicles, whatever they might be, might have a tough time parking there. So it might be good in this session to go ahead and add that closure request, but they weren't quite ready to do so. So yeah, I would imagine that at some point we're going to see those requests come through.
Any public comments? If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, you're welcome to use the raised hand function or the chat function to let us know. If you're in the room and would like to make a comment, you can approach the microphone.
No comments on Zoom?
All right, seeing none. Is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the sidewalk, bike lane, travel lane, and alley at Poplar Building for FA Wilhelm.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is approve lane and sidewalk closure for Crown Castle Fiber at 6 locations.
Hi, it's Alex Gray from the engineering department. This is a big one. So this is, Crown Castle is requesting 6 different locations of around Bloomington, and they also have some parts that extending into the county, but they have been noted to, that we can't approve those. So they will be talking with the county for those sections. But to go over, a lot of it is aerial, so it'll be attaching to Duke poles or the other utility poles in the area. But there is some segments that are underground, and I did try to note that a little bit in each of the sections. But just to kind of go over, that starts off kind of at the south with the Old State Road 37 at Aurora Road. So it starts on Old 37 and then kind of turns the corner onto Aurora Road, and then it transitions into county. That one starts off underground, and then they move to the poles to go to aerial. And then with that, I detailed like that one would take a few days to a week for them to work on. And that would probably include sidewalk and path closure because it's on the east side of the road, but it could have some impacts to the lane. But it depends on the site kind of when they get there and start working. Then they move on to South Walnut Street Pike, which then transitions into Henderson, and then that whole section is between Heather and Winslow. This one is almost totally aerial work, so they'll just have a moving vehicle that goes along Walnut Street Pike up to Winslow. That one, they have it as estimated as 4 weeks, but it may not take that long. It just kind of, assuming, weather and other things that they wanted to include that. Then the third is where it's Henderson between Winslow and Miller Drive. This one, it transitions into underground to aerial, and then I believe back to underground. And this does go by South High School, which I did make notes with them about the school zone times, trying to avoid when there's pickup and drop off in those areas. That way we do not disrupt the bus traffic. For that section, it is also estimated probably about 4 weeks. And that one would likely include some lane and sidewalk closures. The lanes more so for the aerial, sidewalks for when they're doing the underground. And then it moves on to some of the kind of farther out sections. So this one is Woodlawn between 10th and Cottage Grove. The plans, if you have them, this one's it's kind of a funny shape. So it kind of goes
Woodlawn, and then I think, yeah, Cottage Grove to Woodlawn, and then kind of makes almost like an S, backwards S shape. And that one is totally underground work and will likely include a lane and sidewalk closure, and they have it to be about a week. And then the next is East 10th Street, just east of North Campbell Street. So it's a very short underground section that's in between two intersections. It shouldn't impact any of the intersections. It would mainly just be the sidewalk, and then they might have vehicles stationed in the lane for part of the time. And that one they expect to take less than a week because it's a very short kind of connection that they have to do. And then the final one is East 17th Street at David Baker Avenue. This one is likely just a lane closure. They most likely won't have to impact the sidewalks because they could utilize the driveway. And that one they expect to take less than a week. So overall, if you do the math, it's about 3 months. And then they would like to start after this Board of Public Works meeting. So then they would wrap up about, I think I put May, yeah, May time.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Is this connected to the citywide fiber project, or is this a completely different project?
This is not with the citywide firework. This is actually for like telephone and the like cellular. So it's actually, it's not, it's separate.
Okay.
It's connecting the cellular network.
Any public comments on this item?
No comments on Zoom.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve lane and sidewalk closures for Crown Castle Fiber at 6 locations.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is approved Bloomington Fire Department purchase of fire engine 2.
Good afternoon. Max Litwin, Deputy Chief, Bloomington Fire Department. We have a standard we strive for that includes a 7-year replacement cycle on our frontline apparatus, followed by a 2 to 3 year cycle for our reserve. So purchasing this would allow to maintain that cycle and minimize downtime and excessive maintenance costs that would occur should we let the apparatus get too aged.
Questions on this item? Any public comments on this item?
Oh, I guess I do have one question. So this is replacing an existing apparatus, is that right?
Yes, sir. So the one that will be replaced will then move into reserve status, which allows us to offboard one of our reserve trucks that we currently have.
And that one that you're offboarding, what will happen to it? Will it be auctioned or something else?
And that depends on the condition of it. We're deep enough in this cycle now that we hope to start recouping some money from those. But thus far, the value of them at this point when they leave is minimal. So we've got maybe a little bit out of them, but not enough to make any significant impact. But we hope that will, if we continue the cycle, see some benefit to that soon.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, any public comments on this?
None on Zoom.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve Bloomington Fire Department purchase of Fire Engine 2.
Second.
All right, I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Roach?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard? Aye. Motion passes. Next, we have approved Bloomington Fire Department purchase of rescue truck.
So a similar theme here. This is actually part of our initiative to reinstate a dedicated rescue company. So we've done that, and they're operating out of a somewhat aged apparatus currently, so this lets us put them in a newer frontline rig that will not be subject to downtime and maintenance, while also allowing us to now have a reserve apparatus so that when that frontline rig does have something that takes it down, they have another unit they can operate out of.
Questions from the board on this item? Any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve Bloomington Fire Department purchase of the rescue truck.
Second?
All right, I will call the roll. Crone.
Aye.
Roach.
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is approved contract renewal 2 for asphalt material with E&B paving, E&B as primary and Milestone Contractors as secondary.
Miranda Beaver for Joe Vandeventer for the Street Department. Per the 2023 contract agreement with E&B Paving and secondary provider Milestone Contractors, both providers have agreed to extend our contract on same terms. This will be a renewal 2 for the asphalt materials, with E&B Paving being the primary provider and Milestone Contracting being the secondary provider.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve contract renewal 2 for asphalt material with E&B as primary and Milestone Contractors as secondary.
Second?
All right, I will call the roll. Crone.
Aye.
Roach.
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next is approved contract renewal 1 for fuel contract with Premier Energy, Petroleum Traders, and Sunoco.
Miranda Beaver, Public Works here again, for Lisa Lozelle of our Fleet Maintenance Division. The Board of Public Works approved on December 19, 2023, agreements for the purchase and delivery of fuel products with the following companies: Premier Energy, Petroleum Traders Corporation, and Sunoco LP. Included in the agreements is the provision for a renewal, and this will be the year 1 renewal for these fuel purchases.
All right, any questions from the board?
Do we know if the costs are going up for this year? Is it the same prices as the previous contract?
The cost is going up. She was getting the workforce breakdown to us. We have not received that back yet. But it will be going up, but it is a slight increase. It's not, it doesn't go over the not to exceed amount for what we're currently paying.
Thank you.
All right, any public comments on this item?
None on Zoom.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve contract renewal number 1 for the fuel contract with Premier Energy, Petroleum Traders, and Sunoco.
Second?
All right, I will call the roll. Crone.
Aye.
Roach.
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have staff reports and other business.
No staff reports today.
All right. Next, we have the approval of claims. Are there any questions on the claims? Any public comments on the claims?
None on Zoom.
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion on the claims?
I move that we approve claims today in the amount of $4,494,134.03.
Second?
All right, I will call the roll. Crone.
Aye.
Roach.
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. And seeing as we have nothing else in the agenda, I will call for adjournment.